Welcome to the Short Funk Podcast. I'm Tom Barbalet. Today, a little bit more about the dream space, particularly my recent experiences associated with certain components of my perspective on sexuality, almost a revelation in a perspective. And here I want to point out that Heron Stone and I went through some of this, a small subset of it, in Stone Ape 159, which I think is called Amputee Riot. So if you want to hear a different perspective on this particular experience, check out Stone Ape 159. We start at about the 18-minute mark. The usual pleasantries and other related nonsense occurs before then, but if you want to get into this topic deeply, start listening at about the 18-minute mark on show 159. When I set myself this particular problem associated with can I get some additional insights into my own understanding or perhaps my own development associated with, I don't know how one would describe it, I guess indoctrinated sexuality? I don't really know what the term would be in order to describe the circumstances. But when I set myself this problem, I didn't think I would actually come up with anything. My expectations remain low. Although I do practice some lucid dreaming, I don't force myself into these things. If they occur, they occur. But I like periodically to set myself problems and see what comes out of it. After having a series of somewhat curious dreams, I woke up at about 2 a.m., pretty well bolt upright, and proceeded to write a series of things down. Now, looking at these things after 2 weeks, as it is now, it just looks like nonsense on the page. I mean, really, if I had a negative view of this whole thing, I could say that this really didn't amount to much. But two things caught me of interest. The first was associated with a series of nonsense words, derogatory nonsense words. But then I realized that these were actually terms that my father used in my early childhood, like when I was about 3 or 4, associated with certain, I don't know what one would call them, maybe family, friends, these kind of things. After a period of time, my mother asked my father not to refer to them anymore because I was a very sing-songy child, and I took a lot of these names and made it into a sing-song thing that I would recite periodically associated with these various derogatory names. And I don't think I would ever recite them in the people's company, but it was just not particularly positive. In fact, the terms were pretty well frowned upon. And what I realized through this was that these were people that existed in a photo album. And I remember as a young boy going through the photo album pretty frequently with both my parents. But it was my father in particular who noted, that some of these women were particular interest, these kind of things. So they had some attributes and things that my father thought were worthy of note. And I realized this was actually an early sexual programming experience, that I looked at this in terms of, these are the attributes that one should look for in a woman. These make the women desirable. And the fact that there was a kind of sing-song narrative, a hierarchical order, these kind of things had a strong influence on me. And it's actually quite curious finding this memory 40-odd years after the fact, well, 35, maybe 38 years after the fact, because as soon as I read the names out, it's almost like in order to cast a spell, you need to say a few nonsense words in a particular order, and then the spell is cast. It was that kind of experience that it brought back a flood of memories from early childhood associated with, I don't know, not necessarily taboo, but just this was like secret men's business that my father had passed me on, almost like keys to a certain thing, that this was something that probably shouldn't be shared with others. And it was strange actually to have this memory come back to me through this dream sequence, because if you'd mentioned these names to me on the Friday evening, I don't think I would have any reflection of what this was. But putting these words together in a particular pattern gave me some insights. But this actually isn't the Googleable part of this particular experience. I think I'm going to save that for a secondary short funk. What's particularly interesting with this secondary thing is it relates to a piece of music as well, which I've been rediscovering as I have rediscovered these strange, somewhat curious footnote memories. Tom Barbalet in San Jose, signing out.